Okay, our article for today. Legacy admissions banned in Colorado, an article by Scott Jasek in Inside Higher Ed. It was announced just a few weeks ago that Colorado Governor Jared Polis, a Democrat, had signed legislation barring legacy preferences, which favor children of alumni in admission to Colorado's public colleges and universities. And the basis behind this was that higher education institutions are moving towards being more meritocratic, and colleges should be looking at who you are and what your potential is, not who your parents and grandparents are. So, statistically in Colorado, according to Scott in this article, 67% of middle to high income students enroll in bachelor programs. 63% of white students enroll in bachelor programs. But when you look at low income, only 47% of students are enrolling in bachelor programs, and only 42% of Latinos are enrolling in bachelor programs. And the belief by many of the educators in Colorado is that many of the students who choose not to attend a higher education institution today are prepared to attend, but they're often denied opportunity because of the preferential treatment that students with familial relationships to the alumni of these institutions have. And they find those preferential treatments are discriminatory in nature and hurt students who are undocumented, first generation, or minorities. And one of the statements in this article was, quote, "A number of states have banned racial preferences. Legacy admissions, by contrast, are affirmative action for the rich, which heap additional advantages on the already advantaged." So before I open this up to this discussion, Mark, I just want to make a couple more points. According to many of the proponents of this article, they find that legacy admissions are unpopular, un-American, and research finds that they don't even increase the donations for which they're intended. Now, the counter-argument by the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education was that A, legacies are more likely to commit, B, legacies need less financial aid, and C, legacies appreciate the campus lore and tradition. And I'll end with this quote in my best John Hausman voice. "These intergenerational ties can help instill a deep and beneficial commitment to the institution. Such ties benefit the institution in terms of advocacy, support, and continuity, helping the institution reinforce and fulfill its mission and continue to play a vital role in transforming lives to society." So let me throw it open to you, Mark, and what say you now?
Am I supposed to know John Hausman, just like I was supposed to know Top Gun? I didn't know who's that dude. Who's John Hausman?
I know. Did you ever see the movie The Paper Chase?
Oh, of course. Why should I know another movie to get me? You know it's bad when our sound engineer, who lives all the way around the world in another country, he's editing our podcasts and he sends me a message. Come on, Mark, you haven't seen Top Gun. Go watch Top Gun. Dave's right. Jeez. No, man, you stay in your lane, man.
well, anyways, he was a very erudite, pretentious voice saying, "We should help our legacies get in because they help perpetuate our special clubs to which we all attend." Bottom line.
Well, listen, this is an interesting article on a lot of levels. And one thing that hit me was a quote in the article by the state representative, Kyle Malika. I think I'm saying that right, Malika. It says a first-generation college graduate and one of the sponsors of the bill in Colorado to bar legacy admissions. And what Kyle says, so I'm just going to stick him with Kyle and stumble over his last name again. Kyle says, like we're buddies, he says, "I remember being asked on college applications, where did my parents go to college? And it made me question if colleges really wanted me." And you know what it reminds me of, Dave? I think, we both come from backgrounds with college-educated parents. There's things that we don't even realize that first-generation students encounter. And I can imagine it would feel that way. Where did your parents go to college? And you're like, do they really want me here? Maybe I don't fit in the club. No wonder people have imposter syndrome.
Yes.
But looking at the essence of this article, so first of all, I'm going to give a little bit of background that we haven't discussed. We've discussed legacy admissions before in this podcast a few times, Dave. But there's some background that I think would be helpful. that I don't ever remember sharing before. So let me share it now. So the policies that led to legacy admissions being enacted, they are not ones that have been in place since the 1600s for schools like William and Mary and Harvard that were started back then, or 1700s or 1800s. They started in the 1920s. And you know when they started? When there was an influx of Jewish and Catholic applicants at the most selective schools. So just like we talked about last week, I think it was, or 2 weeks ago, when we talked about the book The Chosen, and we talked about the history of holistic admissions, is that it was done because Harvard, Princeton, and Yale were getting too many Jewish students. And there was an attempt by the powers that be to keep them more white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. The same is true for why legacy admissions came into place. So it's just some interesting history. And of your most selective schools in the country, the 100 most selective, 3/4 of them have legacy admissions right now. Whereas when you look at all of the colleges across the country, and this is based on a survey that was done of 499 colleges and universities by Inside Higher Ed and Gallup, it found that 42% overall of private schools consider legacy, and only 6% of public schools consider legacy. And legacy is actually something that is not considered in other parts of the world, like your Cambridges and your Oxfords and, LSEs and London School of Economics and other schools. It's just not something that's done. This is very much an American thing, and that you don't find it in other countries. And once again, we talked about how it was implemented in the 20s. And it's interesting how most of your highly selective schools use legacy admissions, but overall, minority of private schools do, and only 6% of publics. I'm going to share something, and it's going to seem like, where am I going? Am I going into complete left field? But I'm going to make a point. So there was a book that came out recently that has nothing to do with college admissions, and it's so good that I wanted to make it my recommended resource of the week a few weeks ago. But I said, well, let me stay in my own lane and stick to college admission stuff. The book is called Last Best Hope, American Crisis and Renewal. It's by George Packer. And basically what the book does is it divides America up into 4 different Americas. And it says we're not one America, we're 4 Americas, and we're all at odds with one another. And there's 2 in the Republican camp, and there's 2 in the Democrat camp. So in the Republican camp, they said one America is what he calls free America. And it's the one that emphasizes free enterprise, less corporate taxes, less capital gains, sort of Reagan's vision. It's the CNBC crowd.
Right.
And then a second America is what he calls real America, personified by Sarah Palin's focus on small towns, the heartland, a lot of white racial identity. It's the MAGA crowd. And both this group and the free America vote Republican, but the MAGA guy storming the Capitol has very little in common with Jim Cramer at CNBC.
Yes.
So they're 2 completely different Americas. And then on the Democratic side, and I know people are wondering, like, where am I going? But I think you'll see in a second. I'll land the plane, everybody. Stick with me. I'll land the plane. So on the Democratic side, you have what Packer calls smart America, which is personified by Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, highly educated. And a strong emphasis here is going to college. Education is your ticket. You have to go to the right schools. Most of our listeners would fit in this category of what he calls smart America. And then the fourth America is what he calls just America, as in justice. And these are younger people. And these are people that say, no, America is not the land of opportunity. It's about it's inopportunity, and inopportunity abounds everywhere. And I need to be involved in fighting for a more just America. And he talks about the tension that exists between smart America and just America, and then in all of them, we all need to come together. So I'll move off that now. But the reason why I shared all that is because I so agree with him in breaking down those 4 categories, and particularly young America, which he calls just America. I see this all the time because I have a questionnaire I have all my students I work with fill out. And one of the questions I ask on there is, what political and social issues do you care about? Dave, guess what 4 or 5 of the most common issues that come up all the time are?
It would have to be racial equality and
Black Lives Matter is one.
Yeah. Socioeconomic disparity, and then climate.
Climate is huge. LGBTQ is huge.
Yeah.
The environment, Black Lives Matter, Me Too movement. And, it's funny how you see it like regionally, right? Remember after Parkland happened in Florida? All of my Florida clients were all putting gun control, because, they experienced that. But the point is, these students write with a passion that they want to be involved in fighting for a more just America. Now, why do I bring this up? Because legacy admissions I think, I'm not going to say it's on life support, but it's imperiled because right now they're in their teens and 20s. But as they get into their 40s and 50s and they get more power, I don't see them being down with legacy admissions.
Yeah.
Because, here's a quote from a really good article that ran in the New York Times a while ago about legacy admissions. And here's what it says. Preferential treatment for legacy admissions is anti-meritocratic. It inhibits social mobility. It helps perpetuate a de facto system. In short, it is an engine of inequity. Little wonder it is unpopular with most Americans, yet it is supported by the affluent who both oversee the college admissions process and are its primary beneficiaries. So now listen, anyone listening to me right now thinks, man, he's like taking a sledgehammer to legacy admissions. I actually have a very nuanced view of this. The problem with legacy admissions is that the arguments for it normally don't stand the test of time, right? So, Dave, you brought up the case of argument is that, it's better for financial aid, that if you have legacy admissions, people will, they'll give a lot more money. But a major study was done that took a look at that, and it found that it just was not true. That does not stand it up the test of scrutiny. But one of the arguments for legacy admissions that I think does have some merit, and this came up when Anika and I discussed this. Remember, Nika's someone who works in an advancement and alumni office at a college.
Yeah.
And she is not for removing legacy admissions. And the reason for that is because North Carolina A&T, where she works, they have one of the more robust co-op programs in the country. And who do they use for the co-ops? They tap the alumni. And they tap the alumni and they say, it'd be great if you would take a student on in your company. So my view is that legacy admission should be for people who have proven a high level of involvement, not just for someone because they could check a box. But I also want to make the point that when I look at Just America and where it's heading, I'm not going to say legacy admissions is going to be outlawed. But listen, Dave, we're seeing what's happening right now with likenesses and athletes being able to use their likeness. Like, things can sometimes change and start to change fast when they pick up momentum. And all the momentum right now is moving against legacy admissions. And any thoughts on your part?
Well, yes, I must concur that one of the reasons I thought that my poor alma mater fared poorly with my daughter was that she was very much against the legacy concept.
Yeah,
so I think
she was. She's like, I'm getting in on my own merits. I'm not riding your coattails, Dad.
That's right. So she didn't even put in her application. But be that as it may, I would have loved to have had a little Princeton.
You're struggling getting over that a little bit, by the way.
Well, we just have such a much better mascot, Bulldog. A tiger will take your bulldog any day.
For those who are just listening, Dave went to Princeton, and he just thought for sure Lauren was going to love Princeton. And when he visited, she was like, meh, it's meh, And so his ego was completely bruised. He called me. It was like this emergency call, like the earth ended. My daughter doesn't like my school. Real problems in the real world. Look at this guy over here. People are starving.
Yes, well, I am getting over it. Time heals all wounds. But anyways, going on. But I actually agree with the Just America approach. The fact is that studies are showing that United States is one of the most class-rigid societies now. We often think about Europe being class-conscious and the United States being class-free. Well, the reality is it cannot be any farther from the truth, and it's so hard to escape, to create social economic mobility, and that legacies is one of the holdovers that perpetuate class-structured societies and make it difficult for people of true meritocratic abilities to succeed. A great statistic I read was that in 1911, over half of the admitted students to Harvard, Princeton, and Yale did not pass the entrance exams. But the reason they got in was they were legacies. And so if we truly want to get the best and the brightest, and if we truly want to expand the benefits of this country to all, then I think this is just antithetical to those principles.
There's one other thing I wanted to say, Dave. You quoted the Council for Advancement and Support of Education, which which represents fundraisers, and they're adamant defenders of legacy admission. And I was looking at the 3 points they made in defense of it. And to me, my kids hate when I say this term, but I'm going to say it anyway. Everyone was weak tea.
Yes.
They're like, don't say weak tea, man. Dude, you just can't say weak tea. My kids don't like that. But anyway, if everyone was some weak tea, I'm sorry. It was. So the first point they said is a legacy applicant is more likely to accept an offer of admission, allowing the institution to confidently model its income and class. Not necessarily. And one thing that UPenn did, and I have to admit I respect this, UPenn says if you want legacy to count, you need to apply ED. If you apply regular, then it doesn't count, which I at least that was tipping your hand and showing your commitment. But so that's not necessarily true. Then it says the legacy's applicant's enthusiasm for the institution may lessen the need to make an exceptional financial aid offer. In other words, we may not have to throw money at you, freeing up other resources for other kids because they're so excited to go there. That's not necessarily true. People should not be given the presumption that that's true. And then it says a legacy student's appreciation of the campus lore and traditions can enrich the campus. I'm thinking about a student I worked with this year, and the dad went to UCLA. Okay. And the student's decision came down to UCLA and Cal Berkeley and Washington St. Louis. And the student did not pick UCLA, and he did not in any way, shape, or form feel he needed to go to UCLA because the dad went there. Not at all. And so why somebody should just be given the presumption of those things and they should have an easier acceptance rate on the front end, I have a more nuanced view. If you have someone who has shown an exceptional large commitment to involvement in the institution, I don't have a problem with an institution saying that we are going to factor that in. But just to be given the benefit of the doubt that because, your parents check that box, that you get a better chance of going, I'm not down with that.
Well, can I just add in one thing to your nuanced view? And this is, for all my talk of a meritocratic, there is one difference, and that is money. And that alumni who give money should be given preference, because many times the significant amount of money can really impact the lives of all students involved. I don't know if you just heard this, Mark, but my daughter brought it out to my attention. Do you know who David Geffen is?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you hear about his $125 million gift to Yale School of Drama?
No. When did that go down?
She talked about yesterday. I was about to mail to you. But bottom line is, it is to pay for student education. So now, going forward, every student to the Yale Drama School will be tuition free.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's similar to...
Wow. Yale already had a strong drama program, and now they're going to just get the absolute creme de la creme.
Okay.
Wow.
So I'll be honest. If I'm an admissions guy and David Geffen's daughter comes across my desk, you think I'm going to turn him down?
Put it this way, if you don't, reminds me of when I interviewed Courtney Minden, and I said, "How do you know all these things are working?" And she said, "I still have a job." You wouldn't have a job.
Just drive your career off the suicide cliff.
And I'm in agreement with that. I know a lot of people don't like that because it doesn't feel like this completely perfect society, but people need to look at the big picture. Like, how many people can that one donation help, and how many other students can it help, right? But the problem is, that's true for very large gifts. It's not true for I give $1,000 every year to my school.
And Mark, let's put that in perspective. I believe you said that the cutoff for those is like 5 or 10 million now, which is one of the reasons why the college, the Lori Loughlin thing hit a nerve, because we can still make a difference with $500,000. We don't have to open our purse for 10.
Yeah, as much as I hate to admit it, that Rick's Singer was like he was kind of brilliant in a criminal way. His side door hustle. Like, look, he's basically saying, look, you can try to get in the front door, but these schools have single-digit acceptance rates. Okay, so that's really tough. The back door is development. It's going to cost you at least $10 million, and guess what? It's still not guaranteed.
That's right.
I've got a side hustle that we can do for like about $250,000, and it is guaranteed.
Yeah.
And listen, I'm not endorsing it at all, right? He gave the profession a bad name, but the point well taken. So I think we both agree there are cases where alumni should be considered, and I also think people doing the stuff that Anika's doing that are hooking people up with internships and and using their company that way can be considered alumni that are very actively involved in interviews and other things like that. As a school, you do have a right to look at how someone's going to make your school stronger in its totality. My problem is when you're just automatically given the benefit of the doubt just because you're alumni and there's no proven track record of either philanthropy or high level of service.
Yeah. I just want to make the point that my donations paid for at least 2 of the sprinklers on the Cannon Green sprinkler system. So
before it was the gas for the lawnmower. Is that more or less? Are you going up or down here?
Well, I'm just upping my profile there. Well, I don't know.
You know what? I will say something else too, Dave. This happens to me, sometimes, and it's happened to me 2 or 3 times in this last year, actually. And it's funny. It's always couched with some hemming and some hawing because people feel a little guilty. But they say, I have something I want to talk to you about. I'm a little uncomfortable with this, but, they hem and haw a bit. And then they ask me if they were to make a contribution to their school, would it help their kid? And this is like someone that's never given really, right? And now their kid's a junior and a senior. And by the way, these are not $50 million gifts, right? I mean, we never really get into the particular numbers, but I know the numbers they're talking about are not enough to move. As soon as I tell them the kind of gift that needs to move the needle, then they kind of drop their head, and that's the end of that conversation.
That's right. but throw that money in the SAT program.
Yeah. All right, Dave. I think we've talked this one out, but it was a good conversation. It was a good article, and I commend Colorado for making that decision.
Very much.
May your tribe increase.
So
especially for public schools, by the way, that have a sort of a unique mission to serve the public, right? So it's not surprising to me that 6% of public schools have legacy admission versus 42% of private.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think that's a good vote. That's a good vote.
Get some sleep, man. You worked all night.
Blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, blah, blah.